So we've all heard this before. People will say, just trust whatever's in your heart. And somewhere in your life, someone said to you, trust what you think, which I'm calling trust your head. And definitely, most definitely, you've heard, trust your gut. I mean, that's the classic, right? You know, trust in your heart, trust in your head. Listen, that's definitely good advice. And sometimes that's all you have, and you got to do it. You got to run with that. You got to trust what's in your heart. You got to trust what's in your head. But really, when it comes to trusting your heart, trusting your head, trusting your gut, trusting your heart and trusting your head are really the most riskiest of the three. Because trusting your gut, when you have that feeling, well, that's really just a perfect, most beautiful intersection of those first two. And when you don't, when you have a feeling in your gut and you don't trust it, well, the universe just might tell you what to do. And that can be a really, really hard lesson. So today is December 19th, 2024. And this is episode 11 of the 2024 season of the No Bad Karma podcast, where I muse on lessons to improve your life so you can give your choices a purpose bigger than yourself. And as I was going through my script this morning and thinking about what I wanted to say, you know, I was thinking about a friend of my partner who's going through something. So I really thought I wanted to dedicate today's episode to her. You know, she's going through a situation right now where I'm sure she's feeling something in her gut and she needs to decide whether to trust it or reconcile what's going on in her head and her heart with her partner. Because see, trusting your gut, a lot of times that affects someone else. Trusting your heart and head does too. But, you know, it takes two to work things out. So, you know, I want to dedicate this episode to her and maybe give her something to think about. But as to me and as to this episode, you know, it's something I've wanted to talk about for a long time, pretty much ever since I redirected this podcast to living and loving intentionally. But then, nearly 2 months ago, on October 28th of this year, the universe gave me another hard lesson. So in the first half of today's episode, I want to talk about trusting your heart, your head, your gut. And in the second half, I want to talk about that lesson. I want to talk about what happens when you don't. So in this first part, you know, when I'm talking about trusting your heart, head, and gut, I have some scripted talking points. I have a script. It's meant a lot to me. I've been thinking about it for a long time. But the second part where I want to talk about how the universe will tell you and give you these lessons, well, I've just decided not to script that because I want to give this story justice. And I thought if I scripted it, I might just be reading. So, you know, so I'm going to take this in 4 parts. We'll talk a little bit about trusting your heart. That's part 1, trusting your head, part 2. And then part 3, why trusting your gut is like I said, the most perfect, most beautiful intersection of those two things. And then I'll wrap it up, part 4, with what happens when you don't and the universe tells you. And how that can be a hard lesson. But, you know, also, that's something you need to seize as an opportunity. So let's talk a little bit about trusting your heart because, you know, that's something we often think about in relationships more than anything. But it applies to a lot more. You know, think about any time you've said, my heart just isn't in it anymore. It's kind of a take on that. It is a take on that, right? And that can apply to a job or maybe you're volunteering somewhere. Maybe it applies to a friend group, right? And it's really a pretty simple thing. It's something you feel or you don't. You know, you have this emotional connection. Something moves you or it doesn't. You feel it in your heart. So since so many things in our life are all about relationships, I'll give you a quick relationship example from my own life. At the start of my 3 years of dating for a relationship, I met this girl who I referenced on here before, and I've called her Agent 99, right? So we definitely had a connection from the moment we met, and I felt really hard for her. And she told me from day one that she was emotionally unavailable. Well, frankly, I ignored that, right? And that was wrong of me. But if you've ever been in a heavy relationship that recently ended, as she had been, well, you might choose to retreat into some isolation mode. You might, choose to, if you're dating, not date for a relationship. And, I've said this before, when it comes to dating, you're either dating for a partner or not. I call it the 3 F's: friendship, fucking, or forever, right? So if you're emotionally available, forever definitely isn't at the top of your mind. And I was in a place where I was dating for a partner. So I met this girl, and what I did in this situation is I trusted my heart, and it was an opportunity. I thought she was potentially a good fit for me, and, I tried to pursue her, but my head knew what was going on all along. I just chose to ignore it. And, that turns out to be a fail. But let me give you a job example, right? I don't want to focus too much on relationships here. I want to talk about life in general. And I have a great job example I thought of. My ex-wife worked on the mental health floor of a hospital. And after our daughter was born and she went on her maternity leave, she always planned to go back to work and at least work part-time. So she took her break, went back to work, and after a few weeks of working, she came home one night and said, "I can't do it. My heart's not in it anymore." So I asked her, "What do you mean by that?" And she said, "I used to have a passion for my job and compassion for those I help. Everyone there is someone's child. Some of them are parents, mothers or fathers. And while I'm at work, I hear stories all day about, how awful some of these children are to them, how awful some of these people are to their parents. I heard a story one day about how one person, missed their mother's funeral because they were out getting obliterated. And she said to me, as a new mom, I just can't relate to that. So I don't feel compassion for those people. I don't feel passion for my job, and my heart just isn't in it." So I can stop there because, like I said, it's about your heart being in it. But here's the other thing. She also knew they deserved that compassion. And that was her head thinking. She was trusting her gut, ultimately, and left her job, even though, we were planning initially on a 2-income family. We didn't know what we were going to do, but she had processed something in her emotionally, processed something in her head, and had a gut feeling and decided to leave her job. Let's stick with the whole trust in your heart for a minute, because just think of any time you maybe volunteered somewhere for a long time. Or like I said, maybe it's a friend group thing and you go out with friends on a regular basis, or maybe it's your Wednesday night bowling league. And after a few years of it, maybe your heart's just not in it anymore. Maybe you want to be home with your family. Maybe you just don't want to spend time with those people for whatever reason. So sometimes you just have to trust your heart. And when your heart's not in something, it's probably not healthy for you. In my relationship example, even though it didn't work out, I tried trusting my heart and pursuing it. And, sometimes we have to trust our heart and what we're emotionally feeling and see where something goes, because maybe that's all we have. But my head told me it probably wouldn't. And if I would have trusted my gut, I probably just would have had a much better perspective on it and at least not have fallen as hard for the girl, right? So it's okay to trust your heart when your head's not aligning, but you just have to be aware that something might not work out. But let's talk about trust in your head, right? And again, it's simple. It's about, what do you think? What do you really think about the situation you're in? If you just take emotions out of it for a minute, if you just step back, think about that relationship you're in, think about that person you're dating, think about that job, think about that friend group, that place you volunteer. We all have the ability to deduce, reason, apply logic, think about our situation. We all have the ability to analyze. We do it every day without realizing it. Some people might be better at it than others, but every day you're on this earth just proves yet again you have the ability to process your surroundings and do something about it. It's called survival. So trust in your head really just comes down to, what do you think about a situation? What is your head, your intelligence, everything you know about a situation telling you? Now, the examples should be obvious. Think about relationships where you hear about somebody being in an abusive relationship, or being with an alcoholic, or somebody who's got a drug problem. Think about a job where maybe you're working crazy hours that interfere with your life, always working overtime. It's interfering with your relationship with your kids, your time with your partner. Think about volunteering. Maybe you're running off and volunteering when you should be doing something else, and you recognize that you're the only one always there helping at these events. And then one day you have an epiphany, you come to your senses, right? You realize that you shouldn't be with someone that's being so mentally, verbally, or physically abusive. You realize that guy isn't going to be good enough until he quits drinking. Or with a job, you realize that you're the only one working late every night. You're not going to make any more money. Maybe your career is going to the shitter, right? And while I'm certainly a fan of volunteering and giving back to humanity, sadly, so many organizations just eat up their volunteers, chew them up, spit them out. I'm not saying they intend to, but, if you're always the one there for them, and there comes a day where you're just empty and you have nothing more to give, and you step back and think about that, and you're like, why am I here? If you take emotions out of these situations and just think about them logically, sometimes we suddenly see the light. And that brings us to trust in your gut, right? And so many times we hear about that as, we hear somebody say, well, just trust your gut, or we say, I should have trusted my gut in that situation. I had a gut instinct, but I didn't follow it, right? We all have these gut instincts. We've all had them. And sometimes it's our immediate response, and that's even better when it is, right? Think again about dating and relationships. Somebody might ask you to go out, and you immediately respond yes or no because you've trusted your gut instinct. And that gut instinct's, really based on a bunch of past emotional, heart, and head things that you've thought about and processed based on your past. Maybe that guy that asks you out is a redhead, and you're like, every ginger I've ever dated. No, it's not about being right or wrong, right? But the truth is, you have an opinion about what's right for you or what's wrong for you, and that's okay. Because trust in your gut is kind of that, like I said, perfect intersection of all these bits of heart and head data that you have, and you use it to process who you want to date. In the 3 years I spent looking for a partner, I had several women tell me, oh, you're in marketing. I don't date guys in marketing. They're players, right? Well, that's because a lot of marketing people have our extroverted social moments that can make somebody feel uncomfortable. And maybe that person isn't confident being around somebody like that. And, that's fine. That's what works for them. Now, maybe some of them made a mistake, but I'm also in IT, and I've heard, I never date IT guys. They like to stay home and play video games. Well, I play Wordle and Candy Crush. That's about it. So sometimes that trust in your gut's based on maybe a little stereotyping, but at the end of the day, it's based on your past experiences. It's based on that heart and head data. And there's something real to that, right? And that's what real to the person processing it. That's what makes us all different. But again, trust in your gut's not just about relationships. It's all over life. I explained it in the work example with my ex-wife. But, you can have the same job for 20 years. Maybe there's a layoff. And emotionally you panic. And your head says, maybe it's time for me to leave. But maybe you trust your gut and stay. Because maybe you're using your heart and your head data about that job to make a decision. You can't, you almost have to. You can't rely on what somebody else is going to tell you. Maybe you feel a passion for that job. Maybe you feel a passion for that employer. Maybe you feel that's reciprocated to you. Or maybe you have information about that business that makes you feel your job is safe. You have to trust your gut in those situations. So I'll tell you, well, you probably should have heard the story by now, but I'll recap a story about what happened to me when I didn't trust my gut. If you listen to the Instacart series, I talked about this in the Instacarting for Thrival Part 3 episode. I had an opportunity with a former employer that I trusted deeply. It was a long-term relationship. I had an emotional connection to this guy. I also knew he was on his way out the door. He was getting ready to retire. So logically, I had an opinion about where he was in his business, right? And he presented a project to me that offered a huge payout if I helped do it. So, as the project continued to go on, he continued to drag out my payments, and my gut was telling me, my head was even telling me that even though I had 30 years of emotional history, heart with this guy, that he might screw me. And he did. I trusted my gut and tried to take steps to prevent it, but it was kind of too late because you see, at the beginning, I almost said no because I knew the offer was too good to be true. And my gut was pretty much telling me not to do it. But I didn't trust it because saying no would have meant some short-term pain, and saying yes presented a longer-term gain. But I didn't trust my gut. And instead, I trusted my emotional connection with the guy. I trusted my heart. You see, a lot of times trusting your gut means you're going to take on some short or long-term challenge that's going to be tough. It's hard. So it makes trusting your gut hard sometimes. So trusting your gut is really some simple logic based on heart and head data. And by logic, if you ever took a logic class, they say, if this and if this, then yes. And if this and if this, then no. So your heart could say yes, and your head says yes, and your gut's probably most definitely saying yes. And if your heart's saying no, and your head's saying no, then your gut's probably telling you no, right? And it's simple. The answer's simple in those situations. Where it gets tough is when they don't match. I mean, you can pretty much always check your gut by kind of taking your gut out of it for a second. Think about your heart, think about your head. And if they're matching up, then your gut's right? But in those gut moments, and you think about how it makes you feel, like I said, and think about your non-emotional analysis of the situation. Because if your heart and head are matching, either way, yes, yes, no, no, it's telling you your gut's right or wrong. But like I said, when it gets hard, it's when your head's telling you one thing, your heart's telling you something else. And maybe you're not feeling a gut instinct, or that conflict means I'm not going to trust my gut. So it's not wrong. It's risk. And it's usually a huge risk. And sometimes it's going to pay off in life, and sometimes it won't. I can tell you it usually won't. Sometimes we know what the gut is telling us, and we just choose to ignore it. Maybe not once, maybe not twice, but 3 times, 4 times, repeatedly. And that's where it gets nasty. Because the universe will eventually tell you what to do if you keep ignoring your gut. So today's December 19th, like I said. And you can go all the way back to August when I recorded an episode and I talked about deleting your apps. And in that episode, I talked about how I trusted my gut when I met my partner, and I immediately deleted my apps. And when I recorded that episode in August talking about deleting my apps, I was really talking about, well, I wasn't sure what I was talking about, but I was primarily talking about deleting my Instacart app when I recorded that, because I'd been Instacarting for survival. And I was really feeling it was kind of time to hang up the Instacart hat, try to get back to my side projects, my main projects, making money the way I wanted to. But it was going to cause pain. It was going to cause some shorter term pain without having that income coming in, right? So even though I was talking about deleting my apps and I was pretty much feeling it in my gut, I ignored it. I chose not to do it. And the universe would tell me that was a mistake. Which really brings me to how the universe is going to tell you. And I'll give you my example. So this is all unscripted because I just can't do this story justice if I write it out. It was October 28th. And I'm out Instacarting. And it was kind of weird because that day I was like, I wanted to go out in Instacart, but I was kind of feeling maybe I should stay home. But I was like, I need money, so I'm going to head out. So I headed out Instacarting. I'd been Instacarting at I'll even tell you where I am. I'm in Pittsburgh. I'm in Sharpsburg. And I've been Instacarting at this Costco in Robinson Township, which is clear across town. And but I had some good batches there. So, I took a batch that was headed that way and worked my way over there. Get over to the Costco, ran a couple of batches. And, I was having these mixed feelings about being out. And a batch came up with 2 orders, and they were going right back over by my house in Sharpsburg. Both of them, both the deliveries. So I took it because I just had a feeling that maybe I shouldn't be out. It was one of those days where you're like, yeah, I just feel like being out's maybe a mistake. So I'm going to head back towards the house. Figure it out when I get over there. So I took it, right? So I'm in the Costco shopping these 2 orders, and I get a text from my partner. And like I said, if you've been listening to the episode, I mentioned my partner and I were expecting. And she's like, hey, I think I might be in labor. So I'm standing in Costco shopping for other people, and maybe my partner's in labor here. And I have our only car. Okay. Let me throw that in there. Only working car, at least. So I give her a call. I'm like, do you want me to cancel these? Head home right away? And she's like, no, I think I have time. I said, well, good news. They're going back by the house. So, probably take me a half hour to shop, about a half hour to get back over by the house. Got to drop these orders off. Then I'll head home. Keep me posted. So I hurry up, wrap up the shopping, get checked out, and I head off to do the delivery. Now, I'm driving through town, and so I'm being a typical Pittsburgh driver, which is, I would say, assertive, but I'm being careful. I'm being safe. My heart's beating hard, right? I'm a little concerned about what's going on, but I head off to the deliveries, and I drop off the first one off, which is right near the house, and the second one was a little further up, Route 28, up by New Kensington and Trentham. And so I dropped the first one off, and she's keeping me posted. She's like, "Yep, definitely think I might be in labor. The OB wants us to get in. They close at 3. Okay, great. So now I'm getting nervous. Jump on Route 28, and I'm stepping on the gas pretty hard. I'm flying, going faster than I normally do. I'm one of these 5 miles over the speed limit type guy, and I'm doing more than 5 miles over. And, there was a lot of traffic that day, and everybody was going pretty quick, but I was definitely one of the fastest guys on the road. And of course, what do you think happens? But I look ahead and I see a cop in the median. So I start slowing down, step on the brake, slow down as much as I can, get out of the fast lane, get back over to the slow lane, trying to be as casual as I can, right? So this cop doesn't pull me over. Go by him, see him still sitting there. I'm like, I'm good. But I was watching in the rearview mirror. I was keeping my eye out. And sure enough, he pulls out. I see him speeding up. I see him get over into my lane. I see him working his way up behind me. Sure as hell, the lights come on. Cop pulls me over. I immediately think he's going to give me a ticket for speeding, right? You know why I pulled you over today, sir? No, why? I played dumb. Well, your registration's suspended. I'm like, thank God he didn't say speeding, right? So, your registration's suspended. And, did you know that? And I'm like, no, this isn't my car. It's my partner. So he asked for the standard license and, insurance and registration stuff. So I pull it out, pull the license out. He asked what I was doing. I said, I'm out Instacarting, point to the groceries and back, point to my phone, which is on a mount, and it had the app up. Right. And he's like, so this isn't your car. And I'm like, no, it's my partner's. He's like, oh, you have an Ohio license. What do you do you live here? Because if you live in a state 30 days, you're supposed to, get a license in that state, or at least here in Pennsylvania. And I said, no, I have a lease in Ohio until the end of November, which was true. And here it was, like I said, October 28th. I said, I spent part of my time here. I'm moving here in December or January. And I said, but I, Instacart to make ends meet. He said, I'll be right back. So he goes, sits in the car for a minute, comes back up, and he says, well, your registration is suspended because you owe some old tolls to the Turnpike Commission, and I'm supposed to impound your car. He said, but I get the situation. He's like, I'm going to let you go. Just make sure you get this taken care of in the next 24 hours. I'm like, thank you so much. So what do? So meanwhile, my partner's texting me, you got to get home. We got to be there by 3. I'm like, just hang tight. I got pulled over. So he lets me go. I go and make the delivery. And funny enough, it was a birthday gift that a woman ordered for her dad. And I'm thinking to myself, well, how appropriate if my child's delivered today. So I fly, or I don't fly, I go and make the delivery. And then I head home and as quickly as I can without speeding, get home, and plenty of time to make it to the OB. Not a lot of time, but it's about 2:30, right? We got to be there by 3. And they said to come in when they were closing. They check her out. And thankfully, it's like 5 minutes down the road, right? So we jump in the car. We're headed to the OB. Like I said, 5 minutes down the road, probably about 3 miles. We're almost there, a half a mile away. And the car stops moving. Now, if you know anything about transmissions, when a transmission drops out, that's exactly what happens. So here my pregnant partner and I are sitting at the side of the road, barely on the side of the road, not moving, about 5 minutes to 3 at this point, and she could be in labor. The universe will give you a hard lesson if you're not trusting your gut. Here, it was about 2 months had elapsed since I thought maybe I should stop Instacarting. Even that day, I thought maybe today's not a day to go out Instacarting. I should have trusted my gut. So, long story short, she wasn't in labor that day. We ended up getting a tow. We ended up getting an Uber home. We ended up getting the car that was not running, jumping it, and getting her to the hospital to get checked out. And it all worked out that the baby wasn't coming that day. But I can tell you, it was a pretty stressful situation. The universe gave us a hard lesson. Now, if you ever listen to this podcast, you know I could give you plenty of other examples from my past where I didn't trust my gut. I got caught cheating right when I was really feeling I needed to end the relationship. My ex-wife feels she should have trusted her gut and left me the first time I cheated. You see, trusting your gut is about making really hard, painful decisions that are going to bring a short-term challenge. At a minimum, you're going to have a short-term pain. Might be a long-term pain. But at the end of the day, it's going to be for a much bigger gain. So when your gut's telling you something, you can't ignore it. Sometimes it's going to be hard, but it's going to be a hell of a lot easier than the universe giving you the lesson. Because here's the thing. Trusting your gut always seems immediately like it's all about you. But the truth is, those hard decisions, that thing you're feeling in your gut, is probably affecting someone else you love and care about. Maybe it's your partner, maybe it's your kids, maybe it's your parents. It's affecting someone else. So the next time you think about whether to trust your gut or not, think about how it might affect others. Because after all, that's how you give your choices a purpose bigger than yourself. I'll see you soon.